You mentioned Jagger, and it's so fascinating to me because I know your children. We've spent time around each other's children. I don't say this, kind of trying to grandstand because you're on. You and John are amazing parents, like really, really, really involved, fantastic. You guys have completely opposite ways to go about it, and I think that is it's like this perfect mix of harmony. But Jagger is a really, really, really good player, right? He's a really good junior. He has been. I've hit with him. I remember when I'm hitting with him, you have zero. You didn't say a word, and John talked a lot, which is kind of standard for dinner, but also translates to talk through the challenges of having done what you've done. And John played, doubles on tour as well, and he was a really good college player. Talk through the challenges on what's the cadence between input because you know it versus stepping back because maybe that's what's called for at the time. Kind of talk about that delicate balance of having been a former player, knowing this. You're the captain of our nation's team, but also you have a child who's kind of going through maybe some paces that you've been through before.
Yeah. First, I have to say, my parents never got involved in my tennis. It's a tough sport. I mean, in juniors, you see a lot of different things. And my parents were smart enough to know they knew sports, but they didn't know tennis. John came from a tennis family and his dad was his coach and they had an amazing experience with it. That's not always the case. So he kind of came into it when we were having kids, like, oh no, it's going to be the greatest. We're going to have all these kids. They're all going to play tennis. And I say that, and every kid is different. So we have 4 children. They all learned how to play. 3 of them quit. So I blame John. I'm didn't make it more fun enough.
That's his fault.
Yeah. But, with similar to the Billie Jean King Cup, the very first weekend, my personality, I'm not going to say too much. I'm not going to kind of go crazy and change anything. So I tried to be a little bit more careful with Billie Jean King Cup and try and keep it a little bit more general. I'm just getting to know a lot of these players the very first week. I'm not going to be so why do you hold that grip? Why are you doing that? So with our son, I don't know why it is. Jagger is incredibly coachable. And I think you would hear that from kind of anybody who's been on court with him. He takes it pretty well. He doesn't give it back to us and oh, be quiet or you're a parent or whatever. So that part is pretty easy. Of course, we get frustrated with him for other things. And I have to try and separate that. Okay, you're a month behind in school. And you didn't make one forehand up. Separate the issues here. But we enjoy it. It's actually really fun to get out there with him on the court. It wasn't so much fun with our daughters. They didn't enjoy it. So you can kind of see that they've gone on to other things. But also just navigating it in terms of the biggest thing is we try and push is the big picture. This one match in this one city and wherever it is, Midwest, it's not going to matter. Did you learn something this week from it or whatever? The big picture kind of helps. Obviously, the kids are so wrapped up in wins and losses, and that equates to either good or bad and trying to get it a little bit bigger picture. But for most part, I think the journey with him has been 90 to 95% positive. Of course, we've had some tough moments. He's had a lot of injuries and had to overcome a lot. But for the most part, we've always felt as a unit, we all work really well together, which is nice.
It's a weird thing to say about a kid, or he's becoming I don't know if he's, I guess he's, friends' kids, you always think they're kids, but he's an adult now. It's weird to look at a kid when he's 14 years old. And he's obviously older now, but and be that kid's a gentleman. He actually understands conversation. He's a gentleman. Anyways, I think he's just the nicest.
One of the funniest stories
ever,
this is in junior tennis. You see it all. And I think it was when he was 14 and maybe he was 15, 16 now. I think 14. He was changing sides and his opponent started saying shit about me. It was crazy. And he kind of was
I know better than that.
He was exactly. He was hey, what? And this kid is saying my name and calling me swear words. I had no idea who the kid was. I didn't know his name. I wasn't there. So John was there. So John's like texting me. He's like, I don't know what's going on. Jagger, I think, is hurt because he's like, I don't know if he's crying. He's like all rattled out there. So like one of the times Jagger gets a ball and he's like telling John, he's like, the guy just called mom, like beep, beep, beep. And John was like, wait, what? So it's like, it's pretty funny you go through these things. Like he was like so rattled from it. He was, after the match, John was like, next time, bud, you just go over there. And, John, my husband's super feisty. Jagger's not. So John's like, dude, next time that happens, just go over there and like punch the guy.
And if you need any advice about that, just listen to Brian's episode again.
Actually,
you see it take someone out.
But you see some wild shit out there in the juniors. My goodness.
So 2 things I want to get your take on, and then we'll let you get out of here. So I think Jagger and I remember hearing this name twice last year, and it was from you and it was from Jim Courier. And there's like a little bit of, people have opinions about it this week with young player Darwin Blanch. I don't know what our expectation set is. He goes out and he plays Rafa, loses 1-0. Now he's 16 years old. My opinion is that like there are steps that you can't skip, right? You need to go junior, which he's been successful in juniors, then challengers, then futures. And I kind of tend to blame a team that's guiding him. You put him in a situation where it's a little untenable. He's not ready to go on a run in Madrid yet. He's not physically, he's 6'4", but kind of has that like giraffe thing where he's going to be a monster, but he's still a little gangly. Like you have to be able to move. So it goes out there. Is that experience good? Should we be, and I understand they probably negotiated these wild cards way back when he turns pro. So it's tough to like say you can't have one now. The agent's kind of stuck because they've promised it, but how did you feel watching it? Going in, I'm excited. Then when it's happening, I'm like, I don't actually know that this is productive.
Yeah. So Darwin is the same age as Jagger. I think he's about 3 months younger. So we've obviously known him for a while. Amazing kid. Talk about a gentleman. He as well is a super kind soul, great kid. Every single kid in the juniors is cheering for him. That kind of tells you how well liked he is. It was really funny. Last year, he played Kalamazoo. He played up in the 18s. He was still 15 at the time. He lost in the quarters. Obviously, the winner got a main draw wild card. But the USTA, they know he's something special. They offered him the U.S. Open quali wild card. And it was actually announced that he was taking it. And it was his team. And I would assume Juan Carlos Ferreira that said, no, you're not accepting a quali wild card at the U.S. Open. You're not ready, is what the message that I got, whether that was from Juan Carlos or someone else on his team. They deemed Darwin not ready to play the U.S. Open qualies. So he went back and he actually played the 16 and under Junior Davis Cup for the U.S. He went back and played like 15,000s. I was surprised that in Miami, he rolled up and took a main draw wild card. Because I like you, I was like, isn't there like a little bit of progression there from saying 15Ks to maybe playing qualies, like take a quali wild card. But he played pretty well in Miami. Lost, I think it was 4-2. It seemed like against Rafa, it was like just a perfect storm of being on a court like that big, throw in a little bit of altitude, throw in like the greatest player of all time, or obviously one of them, one of the three. And he just couldn't play the way we're used to seeing. So kind of threw him out into the fire. I think on a side court against someone else, it would have been a lot better. You obviously can't control the draws. But it'll be interesting to see what they do now. Like, where does he go from here? Obviously getting a challenger win, just a main tour level match win and a challenger win is the next goal. But there's a long view in sight for Darwin. And I think that he's got good people around him. They'll kind of figure it out. But that just seemed like a perfect like shitstorm yesterday against Rafa.
Oof. Yeah, I mean, it's a shitstorm when you're like 4 in the world playing Rafa on clay when he's feeling it, much less 16. So what the one thing, like the cautionary tale that like whoever is thinking through these things, and I'm sure there's like a renegotiation of strategy with what tournaments he's playing and when we dip our toe in and when we do a cannonball. But like the Donald Young of things where he went 0-15 in his first main draw matches. And I think it had a significant effect on his confidence for like years. Like I think he was a phenom when he was 15. And I don't think he actually was tour ready because of all these, beatings that he took. for if all you do is lose for 2 years, even if you want to qualify it with, experience, this, that, and the other, like as you're progressing, you have to feel like you're winning something sometimes. Like I just feel like you have to feel like you're doing it. And so listen, Ferrero's on board. It sounds like his setup is way more advanced than Donald's was, frankly, at that time. So listen, because he goes out and lays an egg against Rafa in that scenario, I don't think anything different than I thought of him a week ago. Like this kid's a stud. He's going to be mad. I mean, you can't teach 6'4" lefty who can create speed. You just can't. And also, it's like, let's incentivize it. Let's quarter semis of a challenger, and let's kind of take baby steps, because we're always so thirsty, especially on the male side, for whoever that next person is. Let's just take a beat. He has plenty of time. He needs to develop physically.